You've heard it said many times before. Horror is subjective. Just like with comedy, the things which terrify somebody can differ from that person to the next. Clowns, zombies, vampires, werewolves, ghosts, demons, kaiju, serial killers, disease, cannibals, aliens, manifestations of human fear have and will continue to prey upon consumers of fiction. But as I've grown older and gained a much deeper love for horror movies, the things that scare me tend to be much different from my peers. Sure, I expect a great horror movie to do well with cinematography, performances, music, storytelling, and atmosphere like any other movie, yet something else is required to make it stand out among the horrendous schlock that Hollywood puts out every year. For me, it's taken a long time to discover what really disturbs me to no end. After all, I've suffered through countless movies fueled by pathetic jump scares. Some have really put me on edge, like A Quiet Place and Poltergeist, but I look at those movies as more fun than truly terrifying. I don't personally find slashers or suspense thrillers all that scary either, just simply exciting if they're done well. Even some of the most highly praised horror films like Night of the Living Dead, Psycho, Eyes Without a Face, and The Thing have really impressed me, but don't exactly terrify me. They're simply great movies that I admire on their own terms. So what is it then? Well, I'll tell you. A horror movie that knows how to use a face. And no, I'm not necessarily talking about the menacing face of a villain. From my experience, the most deeply affecting scenes in any film, regardless of genre, come from the faces of fear, not menace. In order for a horror movie to work on me, the story and characters have to resonate on a personal level. If there's no sympathy or emotion to build a bridge between myself and the people suffering through something traumatic on screen, then I'm left underwhelmed. But when a screenplay can fulfill these great tasks, the first step is complete. It's then the responsibility of the actors to take such material and give the audience every reason to become engaged. Thus, when actors project completely believable, raw, and deep-rooted terror, I experience the kind of fear that I equally crave and dread whenever I see a new horror film. Their fear becomes my own, and when that happens, I'm on board. To support my point here, I'll cite examples from 4 horror films of varying quality, tone, and style, which will be discussed in the following order: Hereditary, The Blair Witch Project, The Shining, and The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. With that in mind, spoiler warnings are in effect for all 4 of these movies. Now let us begin. Ari Aster's debut feature, Hereditary, was a turning point for me in terms of my experience with horror movies. It completely terrified me from start to finish, and in a wide variety of ways. In particular, this was the first movie to really solidify for me why frightened faces among protagonists scare me above all else. Aster's camera deviously emphasizes eyes so incredibly well, making it so when you peer directly into the very souls of characters played by Toni Collette and Alex Wolff, for example, you feel the intensity of every emotion they're experiencing. 2 specific scenes in the movie stand out in this particular way. The first one is a horrific nightmare that the mother, Annie, has one night sometime after her daughter Charlie died in a freak accident. She accidentally lets it slip that she wishes that her son was never born, only to erupt into a raw, unhinged outpouring of grief-stricken angst. A combination of shame and shock make for some faces that a director would kill for, resulting in one of the most dramatic scenes in the film. Later on, there's a scene in which the son Peter has a vision while in school, and the specter stalking him takes possession of his body while in class. Tension continues to rise as Peter loses control of his body to the demon. And just as the music and cinematography is getting to peak intensity, the possessed Peter slams his face into the desk, breaks his nose, and elicits a terrified reaction that has not left my memory since. It's no wonder this guy got PTSD from filming this movie. For this exact reason, I'd urge anyone who is underwhelmed by Hereditary to give it another look. The Blair Witch Project was not the first found footage movie, but it certainly was the groundbreaking watershed moment this style of horror needed. People tend to associate these kind of movies with really poor attempts at jump scares and excuses to shoot on a low budget, which they aren't wrong. This film, however, takes a realistic approach to most everything it does, and offers up some highly bone-chilling sequences. With that, it's amazing how most of the ways that this film establishes fear are done with minimal imagery. It goes back to the idea of fear being filtered down from the characters to the audience. We have to imagine the things that are scaring them based on their reactions, the pervasive sounds of the night, and what we ultimately do see. But this method of storytelling is perhaps best captured in the iconic confession scene near the end of the movie. I mean, it's teased on the poster for a reason. What sends goosebumps down my body the most is how much emotion is captured in Heather Donahue's eyes. Her lips basically never come into the frame, so all we can focus on is the regret, shame, and hopelessness expressed through her tears and snot. On their own, the lines she gives bring closure to her character and establish the terror she's facing, but her fear comes through in everything her face tells us. Things are only made worse when she thinks she sees something towards the end of the scene, only to say,
"I'm scared to close my eyes. I'm scared to open them."
The Blair Witch Project is a great horror movie, but this scene alone almost makes it too scary for me to watch it again.
Here's Johnny!
The first time I watched The Shining, I deeply appreciated the experience, but felt that I needed to see it again to really gauge how I felt about it. That wouldn't happen for almost another year, for when I found out that Alamo Drafthouse was hosting a 4K restoration of the movie, I took my chance, especially since I needed to prepare for the upcoming sequel, Dr. Sleep, anyway. This time I realized how much of a hypnotic masterpiece The Shining is, but also, I recognized what scared me about it. After all, the images themselves aren't really all that frightening to me. Rather, there are three things that scare me about it. The ambiguity of its messages, the oppressive musical score by Wendy Carlos and Rachel Elkind, and, you guessed it, the faces. Of course, the performances given by Jack Nicholson and Shelley Duvall are among the most iconic aspects of this movie. The Here's Johnny scene needs no introduction, although it emphasizes the amazing work that Shelley Duvall was able to put out, despite how poorly she was treated by Stanley Kubrick. From my perspective though, I'm more drawn to Danny Lloyd than any of the three actors playing the Torrance family. In one of the greatest child performances in film history, so much dramatic and emotional tension is wrought from what this boy was able to accomplish on set. I believe every single emotion and character moment he sells, especially when he sees visions of the hotel's horrific past because of his ability to shine. He recoils in fear at the sight of the Grady twins, both their bloody murder scene and the ghost standing before him, in addition to many other paranormal encounters we can assume he witnesses throughout the story. The moment that really creeps me out though, is when Dick Halloran is murdered by Jack Torrance. Yeesh. Just look at this reaction. That is the exact kind of face that a director dreams of whenever they shoot a scene like this. Of course, it's seen earlier in the movie too, but the timing of this edit is a perfect example of mounting the tension of an already shocking scene. Now when I think of the scariest moments of The Shining, it's simply because of that guy. I mentioned that slashers don't tend to scare me. Yeah, let's just say this one broke the trend. Now before I go any further, I should make it clear that when I watched this on a whim last week, I expected it to be a lot bloodier and vulgar than it actually was. By today's standards, Tobe Hooper's groundbreaking but surprisingly restrained slasher movie might actually pull off a PG-13 rating. However, despite the depravity of the cannibal family at odds with the main characters, it's not really their violence that disturbs me. Sure, there are some brilliant jump scare moments like this.
Sally, I hear something. Stop! Stop!
But if we're really going to talk about something that has remained chilling and unbelievably tense 45 years after this film's release, there are few things scarier in cinema than the infamous dinner scene. Up to this point, this hapless Sally Hardesty, portrayed by Marilyn Burns, has not really come across as the main character. Even so, she ranks highly among Sigourney Weaver and Jamie Lee Curtis as one of cinema's great final girls. But before the rousing finale, this savagely disturbing scene, in which she is psychologically tortured by her hungry captors, is about as gross and terrifying as movies get. Hooper's gritty, low-budget approach to this entire production already helped it feel realistic, but Burns sent that realism into the stratosphere with her performance in this scene. As she screams uncontrollably, the camera does a sinister job at showing how much terror hides behind her bloodshot eyes. Never before have I seen such real, unbridled fear in an actress, and it's a huge disservice to Burns that she never seemed to get the awards attention she deserved. That's part of the reason why I made this video, because in the end, even though good direction, a haunting musical score, a terrifying villain, and an effective story are essential to a horror movie, none of it works if the acting is subpar. Horror movies never get scarier to me than when the actors prove to me why I should be scared. Some unfortunate exceptions to this rule exist, but usually when I say that I was underwhelmed by a horror movie that everyone seems to like, it's a safe bet that I blame a lack of performance-centric moments, as in the scenes referenced in this video. Look for that the next time you see one too, for you may find that the reason a scene is scary isn't that a loud noise obnoxiously blasted through the speakers, but rather, a terrified face tells you everything you need to know. So basically my point is, go see The Lighthouse.